Lactantius, The Deaths of the Persecutors, Episode 10. Quo officio repleto circum volvit eum procella nubis, et subtractum oculis hominum rapuit in caelum, et inde discipuli, qui tunc erdrant undicem, adsumptis in locum Iudae proditoris, Matthia et Paulo dispersi sunt per omnem terram ad evangelium predicandum, sicut illis magister Dominus imperawierat. And now, Lactantius continues, and he says, when this duty was complete, meaning the ordaining of his disciples and commissioning them to preach, procella nubis, a storm cloud, enveloped him, wrapped him round, circum volvit eum, and, when he had been withdrawn from the eyes of men, carried him off to heaven. Eum here is masculine, singular, and accusative, referring to Christ, and it's modified by subtractum as well, which is from subtraho, to withdraw or to pull away. This, of course, is a reference to Acts chapter 1 and Christ's ascension. And then, at inde, from that point, his disciples, and then we have a relative clause, who, at that time were 11, adsumptis in locum Iudae proditoris Matthii et Paulo, and here we have an ablative absolute, which has adsumptis as the participle, and Matthia et Paulo, and with Matthias and Paul having been taken into the place of the betrayer Judas. And this is interesting, of course, because Lactantius is here collapsing the events of Acts chapter 1 and the later call of Paul on the road to Damascus. Dispersi sunt. The disciples were scattered. So that's the sentence, really. There's the subject, discipuli, sunt, and the predicate, dispersi. The disciples were scattered per omnem terram, throughout the whole world. Here we have this nice map of the missionary journeys of Paul, which somewhat illustrate this idea. They were scattered throughout the whole world, and the reason was ad evangelium predicandum. Here again we have ad plus a gerundive, and it's indicating purpose. For the purpose of the gospel to be preached, predicandum gerundive, that is a future passive participle modifying evangelium, and the two are neuter, singular, and accusative, for preaching the gospel, just as sicut, their Lord and Master, magister Dominus, two nouns here, had commanded them, imperawierat illis. Notice that the verb impero does not take a direct object, but instead it patterns with this dative indirect object, illis. We take a second look at these two sentences. We see here the ablative absolute, then the main verb, circum volvit, and the second main verb connected by et. The storm cloud enveloped him and took him off. The second sentence, discipuli dispersi sunt. The disciples were scattered. And then we have some subordination with here the ablative absolute and the relative clause. And finally, this subordination as well, this parenthetical, sicut illis magister Dominus imperawierat. I hope you have enjoyed this series on Lactantius and the deaths of the persecutors. You did not actually get to see any persecutors die, but perhaps we will resume Lactantius in a later series. And since we have the time, I'll parse one verb here. Third singular, of course, pluperfect, indicative, and active.